Good morning. Come have a seat. It's time to come praise the Lord. Good morning. Pastors, come forth. It's time to start our Sunday morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry. So on your bulletin, or it might say it on the screen, I don't know, my wife is supposed to do the extravagant welcome this morning, and I'm going to say this on the low because her mom's here and her mom doesn't know, but she might have the flu. So she is at home in bed, so I'm going to do the extravagant welcome this morning. So I will be the voice of the one, and you all will be the voice of the many. We are all welcome here. Welcome to a church that works for peace, justice, equality, and care of Mother Earth. An extravagant welcome to you because of your gender identification, sexual orientation, ethnicity, economic situation, physical and mental challenges, doubting or believing, being depressed or full of joy. We are a community of curious and creative spiritual seekers, striving to learn and embody the way of Jesus and other religious leaders. Like Jesus, we focus on the plundered and the marginalized as we try to address the major issues of our day. One of the ways we seek to heal the world and ourselves is through sharing parts of our personal story. We are all welcome here. And in a moment, we will get up and greet each other with the left hand of fellowship. You might have heard it as the right hand of fellowship, but here at Wedgewood, in honor of Reverend Dr. Nancy Leddens, who was the first Roman Catholic transgender priest, her grandfather would constantly give her things in her left hand, basically saying, I know that the world is trying to make you something other than what you're not, but I want to celebrate who you are. And so here at Wedgewood, we greet each other with the left hand of fellowship in honor of her. So at this time, get up and greet each other.
to do it for the Lord.
What's up with Kyle?
Come on, dude.
I've seen you do it. So can we have all the kids or young at heart or cool? I'm the young at heart. I'm pretending to be an adult. I think I'm pulling it off too well. Hey y'all. So, thumbs up if you had an okay Christmas, right? Good, good, good. So, cool thing is that Christmas is not just one day, it's a season. So we're going to talk a lot about, not only Jesus being born, but just the beginnings. It's okay. You're going to love this story, Kelly. You're going to hear it repeated again in service, but it's a great story. So Luke 2:41. Now every year his parents go to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover. And when he was 12, he being Jesus, they went up as usual for the festival, which was a required festival. Every Jewish male would have went to this festival. So they were all going. I can think of it like, the family reunion, the family camping trip. Everybody has that thing that we're all going. So they're all going. I can see it. They packed up the camels. They've got everybody. We're going. And when the festival was ended, and it probably lasted about a week, so they were in J-Town for about a week. They were going home, but the boy Jesus stays behind in Jerusalem. Yeah. And his parents didn't know. Assuming he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey, and then they started to look for him. Like, wait a minute. He's not sleeping in Aunt Sally's tent. He's not over here. He's not. Somebody go find Uncle Bill. Is Jesus with Uncle Bill? No. Where is he? So now we have a problem. When they didn't find him, they returned. They had to go back to Jerusalem to look for him. Imagine that. Like, you got lost in, pick a really big city.
New York.
Exactly. Think about that. The boy Jesus got left behind in New York. They're freaking out. And so after 3 days,
Home Alone 2.
Huh?
Home Alone 2.
It feels like Home Alone, right? Exactly. Right. See, there you go. See, and when they didn't find him, they went back to New York. Look, after 3 days, they find him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to the rabbis and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him there, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." I always thought that was so nice. Mary was such a chill mom. My mom would not have acted like that.
No, that would not be the reaction.
Exactly. I'm sorry. I saw that going differently in my mind. She's so chill. He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know I must be in my Father's house?" But they didn't understand what he said to them. But then he went back home, and he went to Nazareth and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all those things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and years, in divine and in human favor. Calling your mom. There's no way that happened like that. There's no way. Come on. I ran away from home a couple of times. I can tell you, it didn't happen like this. It did not. But I think it's really interesting. There's so many, I've heard this story a bunch of times since I've grown up. Anthony, you know that's not how this went down, right? But what's interesting is where they found him. Because his mom was probably like, "Oh Lord, he's in a gutter somewhere, and what are we going to do?" And think about it. I don't think there was Jerusalem police. There was no Amber Alert. So where's my baby? She's probably looking everywhere. Have you seen him? Have you seen him? And she found him at the temple. I think this is really interesting because of all the things to get in trouble with your parents about, it was his relationship with God. And it probably wouldn't have been a big secret, because when I think about modern times, and because it says they were astonished when they got there. And I'm thinking to myself, question for you people, young people, do you talk to your parents about your relationship with God? Would it be such an astonishment? You know, if you got lost, would they know where to look for you? Would that be where they looked for you? Exactly, right? I'd have been at the arcade or at my friend's house, or I don't know, I used to go skating a lot. I like skating. But like, would they know that about you? Would they know about you and your relationship with God? Would they be astonished? Or do you ever just feel weirded out about talking to your parents about God? One of the things that I want you to take away from this story is that, one, don't run away. Two, maybe it's time to open that communication with your family about you and God. Does that make sense? Because if Jesus felt so strong about it that he stayed behind, risked danger, risked kidnapping, because all of those, the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. So all the things that we worry about happening to kids could have happened back then. But it was so important to him that he stayed behind. He asked a question or two. He dared to get on adults level and go, I've got questions, I got concerns. You don't expect me to believe all that, do you? He was able to ask. He risked it for God. So that would be my biggest takeaway from this is, what are you willing to risk to get those questions answered? Have you talked to your parents about your relationship with God? And if you have those questions and you don't want to talk to your folks about them, that's what we're for. I'm always open to answer your questions. Monica will answer questions. She has some really good answers. It's true. Ezra has some really good answers. Pastor Chris has some really good answers. Reverend Malou has some really good answers. So don't feel like you have to keep it in. And even more so, when we look for you, will you be like Jesus and be at your Father's house? Something to think about. That's all it is for me.
I'm glad and it's a wonderful thing today, this morning. I've been given this opportunity and welcome. I'm so grateful and I thank God for this family. I'm from Kenya in Africa, and together with my wife, we ran an orphanage with 40 children. 28 of them are in our orphanage and 12 are in our foster care program. Most of these have been caused by violence and HIV/AIDS in Africa. We are trying to reach out and provide a solution, which is a permanent solution. So I'm here requesting for your prayers and support. Thank you.
Amen.
Can we know more about the orphanage?
Yeah, you know,
What's the name of the orphanage?
I don't know anything.
What's the name of it?
The name of this is we ran an orphanage by the name Second Chance Kenya, and our website is secondchancekenya.org. I came with brochures and Pauline has, so that's why I thought I could just talk less brochures.
And it's called what? Say it again, one more time.
Second Chance Kenya. If you can go online, secondchance.org, you'll learn more about orphanage.
Second Chance.
Kenya.org.
Secondchancekenya.org.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Say it one more time, the name of it.
Secondchancekenya.org.
All one word.
We'll get Colleen to share that information with us and put it on our Facebook page and an email also. We thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you for being here today. May God bless your ministry.
Thank you so much.
Advent and Christmas are busy seasons, and now perhaps is a good time for us to all take some deep breaths and practice silence. After a period of silence, we will pray together Psalm 23 as we seek out our Heavenly Shepherd. Sometimes we are not able to find the complete silence that we need, but we can still practice silence. Many times I have walked on our labyrinth and heard sirens, sound of cars, the sound of people, but yet as I walk on the labyrinth and hear the crunching of the small pebbles, there's a different kind of silence. So if you're not able to find silence, try to find different types of silence as you seek the shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Before we collect our financial offering, by the way, you can give by text here on the spot or later, wherever you are on the globe. I wanted to note that the time of Christmas tends to be a time when many of us feel very stretched and tired and weary. We've overdone. A wise person once told me that if you have more than 5 good friends, somebody's being neglected. Often people, count the number of people who are helping them. They keep score. I don't think our God is a scorekeeper. But maybe all you need, or maybe not all you need, but maybe a lot of what you need is just 5 good friends and other support people. But 5 good friends. And maybe all you need to be is one of the 5 good friends for someone else. So it's a touchy thing to get the right balance between self-care and care for others. But just know that whatever you offer to others is a gift to God and a gift to the world.
Lord, if I find favor in your sight, Lord, please hear my heart's cry, desperately waiting to be where you are. Across the hottest deserts, I'll travel near or far for your glory. I will do anything just to see you, to behold you as my King. For your glory, I will do anything just to see you, to behold you as my Queen. I wanna be where you are. Wanna be where you are. I wanna be where you are. Gotta be where you are. Lord, if I find favor in your sight, Lord, please hear my heart's cry. I'm desperately waiting to be where you are. I'll cross the hottest desert, I'll travel near or far for your glory. I will do anything just to see you, to behold you as my King. For your glory, I will do anything just to see you, to behold you as my Queen. I wanna be where you are. Gotta be where you are. I wanna be where you are. Gotta be where you are. Wanna be where you are. I gotta be where, gotta be where, wanna be where you are. Gotta be where you are. If you'll please rise as you are able for the singing of our doxology found in your red chalice hymnals on page 47 or in front of you on your PowerPoint screen. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise God, all creatures here below. Praise God above ye heavenly hosts. Creator Christ and Holy Ghost. Amen. You may be seated.
I know you thank, along with me, thank Monica and Reverend April. I know you join me in thanking Monica and Reverend April for all they give to Wedgewood. And I have to tell you, I'm really counting on God being like Reverend April. I am. I'm serious. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for all you do and who you are. At this time, I'm going to ask my co-pastor's mother and my friend to come forward to do our scripture reading. Aren't we glad to have Dr. Nancy Fairley with us today? Dr. Fairley is, quote, retired professor at Davidson University. Taught anthropology there to a lot of spoiled children. You know, it just drives me crazy. For a long time, they got their laundry done for them. You know, that was part of their tuition. They didn't have to do their laundry. You know, all those hours I fought to get a free dryer and washer. It's not fair. Not fair. Really white, privileged kids, most of them, weren't they?
Yes, but you know, no. Trust me. The minorities kids come in, they're just as smart. They work just as hard to get in. Yeah. And so the first year, they see white privilege close up, so they be like, what? The second year, I'm like, you said what? Last year you were saying that white kids said this. Now I hear you saying this. So that thing is contagious. You buy into the system, you can be any color and have white privilege. Of course, if you're my color, somebody will knock you back and remind you, I'm not supposed to have it. But you get my point, right? Yeah. Okay.
By the way, I've always called her Reverend Dr. Nancy because she's a preacher too. She's preached here. We want her to preach again, right? Amen. And also want to let you know that Reverend Fairley, Dr. Fairley, works in Ghana, has a home in Ghana, spends a lot of her time in Ghana doing work there. We appreciate who you are. And I also recall that during this last election cycle, Dr. Fairley said, you know, I'm going to spend my time registering people. Yeah. We need more people doing that. So we thank you so much. Beautiful.
Which one? Now, every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12, they went up as usual for the festival.
When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy, Jesus, stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it.
But his parents did not know.
Assuming he was in the group of travelers.
Assuming
he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey, and then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends.
When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him.
After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions.
All who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers.
When Jesus' parents saw him, though, they were astonished, and his mother said to him,
"Boy, where you been?" Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety.
Jesus said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?"
Despite the visit from the angel Gabriel and the shepherds and the angels saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among those whom he favors," despite that happening, despite something happening, no parent would be able to forget and factor in. Joe and Mary did not understand what Jesus was saying to them. Then Jesus went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them.
His mother treasured all these things in her heart.
And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years
and in divine and human favor.
Share with the congregation. I heard when Marlu got ready to go to middle school, I put her in a school run by the LaSalle Catholic Brothers. Okay, really good school in New York. So the first day of orientation for us, Brother Brian reminded us that when Jesus was 12, he too acted out. Adolescence is hard. It's very hard. So that when I hear this, I'm always thinking about what Brother Brian said to us. If Jesus acted out at 12, and he had divineness within him, what do you expect from your kids? And what he said to us was, hang in there, keep them on the straight and narrow path, but also allow them to spread their wings. That stayed with me all these years.
And I wish that would stay with us all those years. Amen? Amen. Thank you so much.
Because of who you are, I give you glory. Because of who you are, I give you praise. Because of who you are, I will lift my voice to say, Lord, I worship you. Because of who you are, Lord, I worship you. Because of who you are, because of who you are, I give you glory. Because of who you are, I give you praise. Because of who you are, I will lift my voice to say, Lord, I worship you. Because of who you are, Lord, I worship you. Because of who you are, Jehovah Jireh, you're my provider. Jehovah Nissi, Lord, you reign in victory. Jehovah Shalom, you're my Prince of Peace, and I worship you. Because of who you are, because of who you are, I give you glory. Because of who you are, I want to give you praise. Yes, I do. Because of who you are, I'm gonna lift my voice and say, Lord, I worship you. Because of who you are, Lord, I worship you. Because of who you are.
Shanti and Monica's singing is heartfelt. It's not about entertainment. It's heartfelt, and its aim is to connect us to the heart of God. Imagine the most horrifying, bone-chilling scream overflowing with fright and fear scream. And that's what I and about 300 other people heard. A scream which literally stopped us in our tracks. A scream which stopped time, and it was a scream by the mother of a child. We were at Broadway at the beach. Anybody been there? Down at Myrtle Beach, a shopping area? And a mother had lost her child, and she was screaming to high heaven. I don't know if Mary or Joe screamed when they noticed Jesus was not with them. A lot of biblical commentaries and preachers like to water down this text, arguing it was the custom in that time for friends and family to travel in caravans. Joseph and Mary likely assumed Jesus was with another carload. Right. I mean, that's true, but I think it's another feeble attempt to read this text that takes out all of the anxiety and the fear, and as Dr. Fairley said, the actions of a teenager acting out. It cleans it up. But you can't strip this narrative of its fear and do it justice. The text clearly indicates Joe and Mary were scared stiff, and they were not happy with Jesus. Have you ever not known where your child is? Do you know what it's like to have a teenager who does not come home at night and you don't have any idea where they are, whether they are alive, whether they are safe, whether they're up to no good? Some of you know the infamous story of me breaking my wife's nose. Yada, 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 yada. Hope you're happy knowing that story. What some of you may not know is the context. My wife, being the gardener she is, has plants for me to put in the ground, which I always do gladly. False. For better for gardening was not in my marriage vows. Anyway, being my wife always has plants for me to put in the ground, not only at our home, but also at church. I did what any smart person would do, and I bought a 2-person auger. You know what those are? Big machine. I mean, work smarter, not harder, right? Right? Now let me do some foreshadowing. 2-person auger. By definition, a 2-person auger requires how many people to operate it? 2. Bingo! So my precious, darling honey pie bride has 5 plants for me to add to the garden in our front yard, and she says, and I quote, "No need to get the auger, I just need some small holes." When have I ever listened to my spouse? Don't answer that question. I reason, I spent a lot of money on this 2-person auger. I need to use it. Get my money out of it. So the context is me being stupid trying to operate a 2-person auger by myself against the advice of my always right spouse. Context. If you have a gas-operated piece of equipment, you know it's going to be difficult to do what? Start it. After 3 pulls of the 2-person auger, I noticed 2 things. My wife staring at me. And a car full of teenagers pulling up to our driveway. Our gene pool carrier got out of the car, our gene pool carrier who did not come home the previous night. We didn't know if he was dead. We didn't know if he had crossed paths with a serial killer. We didn't know if he was in naughty, naughty land. He has the gall to get out of the car, walk right past us and into the house and not say a single word. I was furious as I tried to start the dang two-person auger, and as fate would have it, my wife stepped behind me. Now, if you've got a pen and paper, write this down. Never step behind a person trying to start a two-person auger. Now, let's not clean this text up. Joe and Mary were as ticked at Jesus as Vicky and I were ticked at our sonny boy. Can we be honest about that and not try to sanitize it? For Joe and Mary, parenting had just got difficult. And my heart goes out to them. Heck, my heart goes out to each and every parent. A question for you parents and your grandparents, your godparents, or those of you wonderful enough to parent people outside of your family of origin. Are these anxious parenting times for you? Please come from the congregation. I remember, this will tell you how old I am. I remember when a boy whose family lived 2 houses down from us joined us for supper, and while we were eating, he excitedly told our son about AOL, America Online. First time I'd ever heard about AOL. And I knew deep within my soul that parenting my child was going to be much more difficult, and he was going to be exposed to more than I had ever imagined and planned for. Scary parenting. I recall sitting in this sanctuary and seeing the tears and listening to the fear and anguish of non-white parents in response to the death of Trayvon Martin, and seeing how non-white parents have conversations with their children that I as a white parent don't have to have, talking about white privilege, Dr. Fairley. That's it. White people don't have to have the conversation with the kids that non-white people have about interacting with cops and different things like that. And I learned how parenting can be difficult for others in ways I never imagined. Parenting is difficult in optimal situations, and if you add extra layers to it, parenting is almost beyond sanity. Parents lose a lot of sleep, amen? That's why they're the only ones who are allowed to sleep during a sermon. Well, at my first church, I had a farmer, and he said, "Chris, you know you've preached a good sermon if you keep a dairyman awake during it." Well, that's the parent angle of looking at this text. However, there's another way to look at the text. It's usually the case with a biblical text, and this angle is from the angle of the child. Without letting Jesus off the hook, let's look at the significance of a child differentiating and the matter of parents launching their child. How did your parents launch you? Heck, have your parents ever launched you? My mother always told her 4 boys that when we were born, she gave us back to God, but she never gave us back to anybody, especially our wives. Get that? How well have you differentiated from your parents? Do you still have some differentiation to do? How accepting have your parents been of your differentiations? At what age did you do your first act of differentiation? Y'all are so radical and leftist and liberated. I can see you differentiating coming out of the womb. "Hey, Mom, get me a cheeseburger and fries. I'm bypassing nursing." And after you get the cheeseburger and fries, please get those darn monitors out of my nursery room. I want privacy. I would tell you my first act of differentiating, but it's so humiliating. I'm so ashamed of what I did. But I guess if you started saying loudly, tell us, the Holy Spirit might lead me to do it. I love it when people beg. When I was 7 years old, gosh, I'm really not sure I can share this. Let me breathe deeply for a second. Maybe you better say, tell me some more. Tell us. When I was 7 years old,
You don't have to tell us.
I pulled from Duke University. I feel so dirty. My act of differentiation was not well received. While the rest of my family watched the UNC Duke basketball game upstairs, I was sent to the basement to watch it by myself. I'm not making this up. How have your acts of differentiation been received? You know, sometimes the first differentiation a child does is telling parents about their sexual orientation and gender identity. It can go very poorly. Imagine the worst, and it's happened to many LGBT people. There are some parents who think their child's purpose in life is to meet all their expectations. In effect, to let the parent live the child's life. Really? You get your life, quit trying to run mine. Amen? You get your life, quit trying to live mine. Have you ever lived your life to please your parents and ended up being as frustrated as a person trying to defeat a squirrel? Another angle on this text is the young Jesus engaged in theological discussions, not only holding his own but surpassing them. Now, I had to chuckle when I read this because it reminded of my son's elementary chess team. They were able to beat high school chess teams. Yeah. Don't ever let anyone despise your youth. Don't ever let an old person convince you they know more than you. Experience and age can be an advantage, but nobody knows everything and nobody experiences everything, so old people don't get knowledge power over others. I was so disappointed to hear the older Senator Claire McCaskill criticize the young Congressperson Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, calling Alexandria a thing and a shining object. How disappointing. Nothing has thrilled me more than to see the thoughts and actions of young people at Wedgewood who are congregants and who are on staff. Of course, I hope many of the core values that have been established at Wedgewood will continue long after I've kicked the bucket. But churches must be living organisms, not stuck in concrete. And it's exciting to see changes, and even more exciting to see the expectation of change to be a core value. The Christian journey is a journey, and we never arrive. Christianity becomes a problem when anybody thinks a destination has been reached. I love the story about the Brennan Center being named after the late Supreme Court Justice William J. Brennan, Jr. It carries forward his humanist vision, the center does, and his passion for justice. But when Brennan's former clerks formed the organization, they went to him and asked permission to use his name and dedicate it to his honor. And he said he would agree to do that, but under one condition. it could not simply follow his views and his opinions. That, he told them, would be originalism. The flawed idea that one can and should interpret the Constitution according to the thoughts of the one who wrote the Constitution, as if all those people agreed, as if a document written long ago could address issues in direct ways centuries removed from its composition. Let there be no discrimination, and that includes age discrimination, right? Paul told Timothy, don't let anybody despise your youth. So you've even got a Bible verse on your side. In some churches, if you are under 70, your ideas are not welcome. Amen. If you don't believe that, I've got some churches I'll tell you I can show you to visit. But not at Wedgewood. Never at Wedgewood. Say that with me. Never at Wedgewood. The 12-year Jesus not only held his own with the elders at the temple, he surpassed them. But you know, that's all fine and dandy. But what worries me is that the Christians already spend too much time at the Lord's house and already spend too much time engaging in theological discussion. And all while the church, the world goes to hell in a handbasket. We're just up here discussing. What do you think? This is what I think. Now let me quickly add, liberals are not going to church too much. We aren't. In fact, to do what God has us to do, to be able to create an amazing mission-oriented congregation, some of us need to be here more on Sundays. How's that for a liberal guilt trip? But let me add, we should never equate churchianity with Christianity. Let me say that again so you can say amen to it. We should never equate churchianity with Christianity. Amen. I'm going to tell you a Christmas story, and I don't want you ever to forget it. Horace was a short, round, balding man of simple taste. He owned 2 suits, one for summer and one for winter, which he wore to church on Sundays. The other 6 days found Horace in khaki work clothes and a cap, with an ever-present stub of a cigar clenched in the left corner of his mouth. Horace never smoked the cigar. Instead, he chewed the cigar the way others chewed toothpicks, pausing only long enough to spit out the shredded bits of tobacco that occasionally came out. Horace owned Jordan's Texaco, an ancestor of today's convenience store. In addition to being a service station, Jordan's Texaco was also a small general store that featured food items, a bit of clothing, essentially the clothes that Horace wore, and a delightful collection of inexpensive and simple toys, including some hand-carved items by Horace that lured children to the back shelves and almost as many adults. Jordan's Texaco in Zebulon, Georgia, was the fabled gathering place. It's where people went to talk and to be community. One of the treasured traditions of the Baptist church in Zebulon was the Christmas Eve worship service. Everybody, and I mean everybody, was at the service, even those who didn't go to church but one time a year. Everyone was at the Christmas Eve worship service except Horace. Horace's absence really bothered the preacher. It really got under his skin. Not only did Horace miss the service, but he kept the service station open until midnight. It was the only business in town to do so. In an age when the celebration of Christ's birth had been grossly commercialized and secularized, the preacher felt the statement made by those who chose to worship God on Christmas Eve was one that deserved the respect and practice of everyone, and that included Horace. And to keep a business open on Christmas Eve to make money, well, that was just awful. At first, the preacher chose to deal with the problem with a pastoral care approach. Hey, Horace, miss seeing you at the miss seeing you and the family at the Christmas Eve service. I hope you weren't sick. Well, thanks, preacher, but I've been doing just fine, Horace returned the comment with a smile. The next year, the preacher took on the role of an encourager. The days before Christmas, the preacher stopped by and made a point to mention he hoped to see Horace and his family at the Christmas Eve service. Every time he was at Jordan's Texaco, and Horace would just say, When Horace failed to attend again, the preacher shamed him. How much money did you make on Christmas Eve? Nah, preacher, didn't make hardly a thing. Horace said the reply, and it was devoid of anger, hurt, remorse, or shame. By the third year he was at the church, the pastor had characterized Horace's attitude as an example of stubbornness, just one of his negative traits. But that third year, something happened. The third year, the preacher's Christmas plans were altered. Because his mother-in-law was sick, the preacher's wife and their children went to be there with her. And the preacher planned to make the 3-hour journey there on Christmas Day. But as it turned out, the weather was so cold and rainy, the church's aged heating system, already pushed to its limits, broke down the afternoon before Christmas Eve, and the Christmas Eve service had to be canceled. After making sure the word was out about the Christmas Eve service, the preacher ate a quick supper and debated about making the trip to his mother-in-law's. But due to the poor weather, he decided to stay in town for the night. And then he came up with an idea. The ever-persistent preacher would go to Jordan's Texaco and convince Horace that he needed to be attending future Christmas Eve services. "Hello, preacher," Horace called from behind the counter where he sat on a stool. "What brings you out tonight?" "Well, my family's gone, and I decided I didn't care to sit by myself tonight, so I thought I'd keep you company." "Yeah, I heard about the church's furnace. If you want, I'll be glad to come over the day after tomorrow, and I'll bring Cleet Boosie, and between the two of us, we might get that thing running for another month or two so we can decide what we're going to do." "I would appreciate that, Horace." About that time, the door of Jordan's Texaco opened up, and in came Wooly. Wooly was a tramp of sorts. Usually could be spotted walking to and from town with a burly sack over his shoulder. Wooly's face was weathered and wreathed with gray hair and a gray beard. In the summer, he only wore knee-length cutoffs and an unbuttoned khaki shirt. As a concession to the few store owners who would tolerate him, Willie would pull out a pair of dingy tennis shoes before entering their establishments. "Come on in here, Willie. Back yourself up to the heater there," said Horace. "You been doing all right?" "Yes, pretty good, Mr. Horace." "It's bit cold out there tonight, ain't it?" "Sure is," said Willie. "You know the preacher here, don't you?" The preacher said, "Willie, I hate to see you out walking on a night like this. Stay here as long as you will, but when you get ready, I will give you a ride where you want to go." "Appreciate it, Reverend, but ain't no need for worry. I makes it all right." "You men want some coffee?" Horace asked. "That'll be good," said Wooly. "By the way, Wooly," Horace began, "I found something under the counter with your name on it." With that, Horace pulled out a package wrapped in tissue paper with a red bow on it. "Santa Claus must have known you'd be stopping by." Horace continued as he removed his cigar stub with a sip of coffee. Wooly pulled out a small dog carved from a piece of wood. "Mighty kind of you, Horace." Yeah, that Santa's something else, ain't he? Horace chimed in. Willie next opened up a package to reveal a khaki shirt identical to the same one Horace was wearing, and most likely identical to what his own shirt had looked like before he cut off the sleeves in the summer. Oh, Mr. Horace, I sure can use this. Willie quickly took off his old shirt, stuffed it in his bag, and carefully donned the gift, taking the time one takes to ease it on as if one was taking a good old hot shower. Well, thank you so much. I suppose I'll be getting on. Merry Christmas to you, Willie. As soon as the door closes, the preacher says, "You old rascal, you." "What?" Horace said with feigning innocence. Over the next couple of hours, 5 different cars pulled in as people brought snacks and coffee and simply got out to stretch and take a break from the road. 3 cars contained families with children traveling to grandma's. One was transporting a set of grandparents to their daughter's house. The other car was driven by a young man on the way to his fiancee's home. I learned that the elderly couple and 2 of his families were regulars who passed through Zebulon each year on Christmas Eve. They talked of how difficult it was to find a place open on Christmas Eve and how Horace's station was both a tradition and a necessity for their trip. At midnight, Horace looked up and saw it was midnight, and he locked up the place, and the preacher followed him to his truck. "Horace, I enjoyed this evening, and I know now why you stay open on Christmas Eve. By the way, how long have you been doing this?" "Oh, ever since my last year of high school when my daddy owned this place. I remember that because that was the year I was in the school's Christmas pageant." "Oh, yeah? You were in your school's Christmas pageant? What role did you play?" "Well, I played the role of the innkeeper." Horace drove away, leaving the preacher time to reflect on the importance and subtlety of the final point in the evening's lesson.
I was like, is that it? Am I done? Am I going? Is the mic on? No? So, one of our rituals at Wedgewood that we do is an altar call. I don't think we've done an altar call in a little while now, so this will be new for some of you who, even if you have been coming to the church for a little while. So what we're going to do is I'm going to invite all who are wanting to receive prayer to come forward, and I will pray for those and for all of you who choose to stay in your seats. And then after that, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to ask you to help me do this as well, is we're just going to give you a blessing on the new year, just by anointing your hands with oil. And if you would just like an anointing without any oil, just let us know. We can do that too, because the oil does have some fragrance in it, and I know allergies, I can't have it on me, so I won't assume you can have it on you. So at this time, if you would like to come forward and just receive prayer, you are welcome to come do so. So we are starting a new thing, which is during announcements times, rather than having 20 minutes of announcements where you forget everything that you just heard in the first 5 minutes of your announcement time, we are asking that if it is an announcement that pertains to things outside of the church, that you submit them in writing to, I believe it's Deacon Brian right now, it might switch to me, and we will have them rolling on a PowerPoint before worship starts, as well as the fact that we have a bulletin board outside where you can always post things. So during this announcement time, if there are any announcements pertaining to things that are happening inside of the church, you can stand up and make those announcements now.
Bible study will continue this Wednesday at 7 o'clock.
Peanut butter and jelly ministry downstairs in the choir room. Any and all help is appreciated. Thank you.
For visitors, first-time visitors to the church, we invite everyone to come to a visitor supper, and we're going to have our next one on Friday, January the 18th, 7 to 9 p.m. All you have to do is show up. We have good appetite and good stories. Now, if you have already been to a visitor supper, that doesn't mean you can't ever come back. Let me know that you want to, because I try to have a few of the quote veterans to be there to mingle with the new people. But we also, even if you've been coming to the church for 10 years and you've never been to a visitor supper, we want everybody to come to our homes. So we look forward to having you.
For the start of 2019, Happy New Year to everybody. We will have our first choir rehearsal that will be in addition to our 10 a.m. So let me just pack up. 2019, choir rehearsals every Sunday. Every Sunday. First, second, third, fourth, and fifth Sunday, 10 a.m. 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Amen. 10 a.m. 10 a.m. 10 a.m. 10 a.m. 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Just like a hallelujah. 10 a.m. 10 a.m. There it is, okay? Every Sunday, 10 a.m. In addition to our weekly Sunday rehearsal that happens at 10 a.m., we're going to have our first choir rehearsal on Saturday, January the 12th, from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. We're going to, for 2019, meet about twice a month, every month on an additional Saturday. We want to do it as early as possible, so if that 12 o'clock time doesn't work out, we can look at it at the start of the next quarter. But for now, for the first quarter, January, February, and March of the year, January 12th, 12:30 to 2 o'clock. You know how I am about time, those who have been in rehearsals with me before. If we don't start till 1:15, 2 o'clock, we're leaving, 12:30 to 2 o'clock. So every week, every Sunday morning, every single Sunday morning, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth Sunday, 10 a.m. And then Saturday, January the 12th, from 12:30 to 2 o'clock. In addition to that, to be announced and to be determined, new choir members and old choir members, please put your bids in for our next social gathering, which will be held at the Yassines, and it will be in the month of February. We're looking to do it on a Sunday. So put your votes in for either first Sunday, second Sunday, third Sunday, or fourth Sunday. There is no fifth Sunday in February. So 4 Sundays we have to choose from. Please put your vote in for one of those Sundays, and we will have our first choir social gathering for 2019. Amen.
Thank you.
Downstairs, when you go down in the main hallway down there, you'll see in one of the rooms there is a redistributing the wealth food pantry. And we have a full fridge in that pantry as well, so be sure to check that. And it is not just for those who are like, oh, I really need to get food this week on a regular basis. It is also for folks who are like, oh, I really need to get food this week because I need to pay this bill and my paycheck didn't look like what it looked like a couple weeks ago. So I just want to make that clear that anybody is welcome to the food pantry on whether it's a regular interval or whether it's a sporadic interval. It is there for you all to take what you need. Does anybody else have any other announcements?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. All right.
Go Virginia. Congratulations to Virginia. What about Clemson?
Go Hoots.
Yeah, but Virginia was a surprise. I looked at the game. She attended the game. He attended the game. And that's my son-in-law.
And first, before you dismiss, co-pastor, this is not a church announcement, so I'm breaking rules. I will take my lashes in a little bit. But I did want to let everyone know because you guys know that I do freelance as a musician, and I've not yet performed in the city of Charlotte so that people can come actually see me. I am performing with a Charlotte band called Diverse Groove, and we will be doing the New Year's ball drop at Carowinds tomorrow from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. So if you have a season pass, you've already purchased a way in. If you don't have a season pass, tickets are only $35. If you go online, I think they're a little cheaper. So if you don't have anything to do and don't mind being in the weather, in the elements, I will be trying to get my Beyonce on tomorrow night from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. So
we are afflicted in every way. In every way we are afflicted. But we are not crushed. We're perplexed. But we're not driven to despair, are we?
no.
We're persecuted, aren't we? But not forsaken. We're struck down, but we're never going to be destroyed. Always carrying the body, in our body, the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made best visible in our bodies everywhere we go. Amen.